What happens when one of Hollywood's most legendary actors sits down with daytime television's most controversial panel? You won't believe what unfolds when Robert De Niro faces off against The View hosts in what began as a simple promotional appearance but quickly spiraled into television chaos. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It was a masterclass in how fast things can explode when egos clash and political opinions collide. From the moment Robert De Niro walked onto the set, the tension was palpable. What was supposed to be a straightforward appearance to promote his latest film already had the makings of a powder keg waiting to ignite. The veteran actor, known for his intense on-screen presence and equally passionate political views off-screen, settled into the guest chair with that familiar steely gaze that had intimidated co-stars for decades. Joy Behar, never one to avoid controversy, wasted no time stepping into treacherous waters. "Robert, we're so excited to have you here," she began with a practiced television smile. "But before we talk about your new project, we have to address the elephant in the room. You've been quite vocal about your political opinions lately, and frankly, some of our viewers find your comments divisive." The shift in De Niro's demeanor was immediate. His jaw tightened, his piercing eyes locked on Behar with laser focus. "Divisive," he repeated slowly, his gravelly tone chilling the studio air. "I think standing up for what's right is exactly what we need more of, not less." Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, sensing the storm but unable to resist stoking it. "But Robert, don't you think celebrities should stay in their lane? You're an actor, not a politician. When you make these inflammatory statements, aren't you alienating half your audience?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a lit fuse. De Niro's hands gripped the arms of his chair. This wasn't a performance. This was real, and the anger was genuine. "What's inflammatory," he shot back, "is sitting silent while democracy is under attack. What's inflammatory is pretending everything is fine when it's not." Sonny Hostin jumped in eagerly. "But your language, Robert. Some of the things you've said are pretty extreme. Don't you think you have a responsibility, with your platform, to be more measured?" The audience, once polite, had fallen into silence. De Niro's publicist squirmed off camera, calculating how to salvage what was turning into a PR disaster. "Measured?" De Niro barked out a humorless laugh. "Here's measured. I've been in this business for 50 years, and I know when something stinks. And right now, a lot stinks." He leaned forward, intensity radiating. "You sit here every day, judging and criticizing like you're the moral authority on everything. But when someone with real experience speaks up, suddenly we should stay in our lane?" Alyssa Farah Griffin, the newest panelist, saw her chance. "Robert, I think what we're saying is that your rhetoric has consequences. When you use certain language about political figures, it creates hostility. Surely you can see that." The word rhetoric hit him like a blow. The silence grew heavier. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, edged with menace. "Rhetoric? You think this is rhetoric? This is reality. This is what happens when people who've never fought for anything try to lecture those who have." Sarah Haynes, uncomfortable with the direction, tried to calm things. "Robert, I think we all want the same thing. What's best for the country? Maybe we can find some common ground." His response was swift and cutting. "Common ground? With people who treat serious issues like game show topics? Stop pretending you understand things you've never lived through." The panel exchanged glances, clearly deciding to double down. Joy Behar leaned back, her smile gone. "Well, Robert, if you're going to come on our show and insult us, maybe you should explain what gives you the right to be so sanctimonious." The challenge landed like a gauntlet. De Niro's eyes narrowed, his smile turning dangerous. "What gives me the right?" "I'll tell you what gives me the right." But before he could unleash his full fury, the show abruptly cut to commercial break, leaving viewers on edge and the studio in chaos. During the break, producers scrambled like ants, whispering frantically into headsets. Darrow sat motionless, breathing controlled, fury simmering. The hosts huddled together like generals planning their next move, convinced they held the upper hand. The real fireworks were only just beginning. When the cameras rolled again, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to toxic. Darrow hadn't moved from his seat, but his posture suggested a predator ready to strike. Joy Behar, either oblivious to the danger or overly confident in her ability to handle it, jumped straight back into the fray with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "Welcome back," she announced with forced cheer, before turning to Darrow with barely concealed hostility. "Robert, you were about to tell us what gives you the right to lecture everyone about politics. We're all ears." Darrow's response came like a slow-building thunderclap. "What gives me the right?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that menacing whisper that had terrified audiences for decades. "I grew up in Little Italy when it meant something. I've seen real struggle, real consequences. I have worked with people who built this country with their bare hands." His voice rose with each word. "And now I have to sit here and listen to a bunch of privileged talking heads who've never had a real job in their lives tell me about rhetoric and responsibility." Whoopi Goldberg, rattled but unwilling to retreat, made her fatal mistake. "Oh, please, Robert. You're an actor. You pretend for a living. The rest of us have real careers, real credentials. Don't act like playing tough guys in movies makes you some kind of authority on anything." The silence that followed was deafening. Darrow's face changed in a way that was subtle yet terrifying. The kind of transformation that had made audiences believe he could truly become his characters. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried the weight of a hurricane. "Real careers?" He rose slowly, his presence filling the set, making the panel seem suddenly small. "You want to talk about real careers? I've been working since I was a teenager. I studied my craft. I dedicated my life to it. I earned everything I have. And you?" He pointed directly at Whoopi. "You think sitting behind that desk makes you qualified to judge anyone?" Sonny Hostin seized the moment, a mistake she would regret. "Robert, you need to calm down. This is our show, and we have the right to ask tough questions. If you can't handle the heat, maybe you shouldn't have come on." The words hung in the air like the calm before a storm. Darrow turned his gaze on her, the intensity so sharp that audience members audibly gasped. "Calm down? Your show?" He laughed without humor. "Let me tell you something about your show. You sit here every day gossiping like teenagers, tearing down people who actually accomplish things. And you call it journalism. You call it commentary. But what it really is a bunch of bitter, jealous women who can't stand that others are more successful than they are." Alyssa Farah Griffin, red-faced and out of her depth, tried to interrupt. "That's completely inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Darrow cut her off with the precision of a knife. "You want to know what's inappropriate? Ambushing a guest who came here in good faith to promote his work. Turning a simple interview into an attack. Pretending you're journalists when you're nothing more than glorified gossips." His voice rose with each accusation, electrifying and terrifying the room. Sarah Haynes, visibly shaking, tried to regain control. "Robert, I think we should take a step back here. This is getting out of hand." "Out of hand!" Darrow's eyes blazed. "This got out of hand the moment you decided to ambush me instead of conducting an interview. You want to know what gives me the right to speak my mind? I'll tell you, it's the same thing that should give you the right. But you've wasted it on petty gossip and manufactured drama." Joy Behar, flushed with anger, made the choice that pushed everything over the edge. "Listen here, Robert. You don't get to come on our show and talk to us like we're nothing. We've all earned our places here, and we don't need some aging actor with anger issues telling us how to do our jobs." The insult landed like a physical blow. Darrow froze, his body going completely still in that dangerous way anyone who had seen his films would recognize. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet, the microphones strained to capture it. But every word rang clear. "Aging actor?" He stepped closer to the panel. Several hosts instinctively leaned back. You think age makes me weak? You think it makes me irrelevant? Let me educate you. Age gives you perspective. It gives you the ability to see through the noise. And right now, I'm looking at a whole lot of noise. Whoopi, deciding she'd had enough, stood to match his energy. That's it. I don't care who you think you are, Robert. You can't come on our show and disrespect us like this. Either you apologize, and we continue like civilized adults, or this interview is over. Darrow didn't hesitate. His reply came with cold fury, his most iconic roles pale compared to the venom in his voice. Civilized adults? You want an apology? Fine, I apologize for thinking you were capable of professionalism. I apologize for believing you might actually want a real conversation instead of staging a witch hunt. The studio dissolved into chaos. Producers gestured frantically off stage. The audience murmured loudly, and the panel looked ready to either flee or fight. But Darrow wasn't finished. Not even close. He surveyed the panel with the cold calculation of a man about to burn every bridge in sight. The tension in the room was suffocating, every person aware they were witnessing something unprecedented, the complete meltdown of what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. You know what your problem is. Darrow's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, instantly silencing the murmuring audience and focusing every camera on his weathered face. Your problem is that you've been sitting behind this desk for so long, you've forgotten what the real world looks like. You've been playing pretend journalist for so long, you actually believe your own act. Joy Behar, her face now completely red with rage, shot back with venom in her voice. How dare you? We've been doing this job longer than you've been politically relevant, Robert. Just because you're famous doesn't mean you get to come here and insult us. Politically relevant? Darrow's laugh was harsh and cutting. Lady, I was fighting for causes when you were still figuring out how to read a teleprompter. I was using my platform to make a difference when you were worried about your ratings and your paychecks. He gestured dismissively at the entire panel. And you want to lecture me about being politically relevant? Sonny Hostin, clearly past the point of rational thought, decided to escalate further. You think being loud and angry makes you right, Robert? You think intimidating people makes your argument stronger? That's not how civilized discourse works. The accusation of intimidation seemed to flip a switch in Darrow that transformed him from angry to absolutely furious. Intimidating? You think I'm intimidating? Let me tell you what's intimidating. Having a bunch of people with microphones and cameras ambush you when you came here in good faith. What's intimidating is being lectured about civility by people who make their living tearing other people down on national television. Whoopi, apparently deciding that retreat was not an option, made what would prove to be the final fatal mistake of the encounter. Robert, you need to check yourself. You're acting like a bully, and frankly, your behavior is embarrassing. Maybe it's time you learn some respect. The word respect seemed to hit Darrow like a lightning bolt. He went completely still for a moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried more menace than all his previous outbursts combined. Respect? You want to talk about respect? He looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home as much as the panel. I'll tell you about respect. Respect is something you earn, not something you demand because you have a television show. He turned back to the panel, his words now delivered with such controlled fury that it seemed to drain all the oxygen from the studio. I've spent 50 years in this business earning respect through hard work, dedication, and talent. I've worked with the greatest directors, actors, and artists of my generation. I've been honored by my peers, by critics, and by audiences around the world. And you think I need to learn respect from a panel of— He paused. Everyone in the studio held their breath, sensing he was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. From a panel of dumb frauds who wouldn't know real journalism if it bit them on their collective ass. The silence that followed was absolute. The audience gasped collectively. The panel sat in stunned silence, and even the camera operators seemed frozen in shock. Darrow had not just crossed the line, he had obliterated it. Whoopi was the first to recover, her voice shaking with rage. "Get him out of here right now. Security." But Darrow wasn't waiting. He was already moving, ripping off his microphone with a savage gesture and tossing it onto the table, where it landed with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent studio. "You want me gone? Fine. I wouldn't want to spend another second in the same room with you people anyway." Joy Behar, her voice high and shrill, shouted after him. "You can't talk to us like that. This is our show." Darrow turned back one last time, his eyes blazing with uncontainable fury. "Your show? This isn't a show. It's a circus, and you're all the clowns. The only difference is that clowns are supposed to be entertaining." He gestured broadly at the entire set. "This is just pathetic." Alyssa Farrah Griffin, apparently still not understanding the gravity of what had just happened, made one final attempt to save face. "Robert, if you would just apologize." "Apologize?" Dairo's voice rose to a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the studio. "The only thing I'm sorry about is that I wasted my time coming here in the first place. You people are everything that's wrong with television, everything that's wrong with media, and everything that's wrong with this country's obsession with manufactured drama over real substance." Sarah Haynes, tears now visible in her eyes, tried one last desperate plea. "Robert, please. This doesn't have to end like this." But Darrow was done. Completely, utterly, and irrevocably done. "Yes, it does. It has to end exactly like this, because this is what you people created. You wanted drama, you got it. You wanted confrontation. Congratulations. You've got more than you can handle." He started walking toward the exit, his long coat billowing behind him like some avenging angel of Hollywood fury. But he wasn't finished. Without turning around, he called back over his shoulder. "And you know what the really sad part is? Somewhere out there, there are real journalists doing real work, asking real questions, and you people are making them all look bad just by existing." The panel sat in stunned silence as he reached the edge of the set. Whoopi, perhaps realizing this was spiraling completely out of control, made one last desperate attempt at damage control. "Robert, wait!" But he was already gone, disappearing into the wings of the studio and leaving behind a panel of shell-shocked hosts, a traumatized audience, and what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about moments in daytime television history. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing the devastation on the faces of the View hosts before finally cutting to what had to be the most awkward commercial break in television history. In those final moments, you could see the reality of what had just happened dawning on everyone involved. This wasn't just a heated interview gone wrong. This was a complete and total demolition of four seasoned television professionals by one man who had finally reached his breaking point, Robert. Darrow had walked onto that set as a guest and left as a legend, having delivered the kind of performance no script could have ever captured, and no director could have ever imagined.